Hello, these are flip notes 4b part 3 in our social psychology unit. And in this section, we're talking about the social situation, how the situation influences our behavior. This section includes a few of social psychology's famous experiments. Let's go. So first, if we're going to talk about the situation, we have to talk about social norms. So social norms are the expected normal behaviors in a situation. They're both implicit and explicit. So things that we outwardly say you're supposed to do, but also things you're just supposed to know you're supposed to do. They can range from general things like when you sneeze, cover your mouth, to much bigger things like if somebody dies, call an ambulance, don't eat them. That would be a taboo, cannibalism. So social norms govern our expectations and our roles within society. The first big experiment in this section is the famous Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. Zimbardo is still around. He wrote some of the big psychology textbooks, and he's done a lot about studying kind of the inner villain within people. But his experiment was about the power of when we are expected to play a role. So role-playing affects attitudes. He created a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University, and he hired college students and randomly assigned them to either be guards or prisoners. And you're going to watch this video in class. But he set it up to be real, like these fake prisoners were even arrested so that it made the situation feel more real. The guards were only told that they couldn't physically harm the prisoners, but they could do pretty much anything else. And he didn't really give them a whole lot of instruction other than that you're a prison guard and you're a prisoner. The experiment was supposed to last for 2 weeks, but he ended up having to cut him off after 6 days. And the reason for that was that it got out of control, that the prisoners accepted their situation and the guards did pretty much anything you could do other than physically harm them. They were humiliating and degrading. At least one of the prisoners kind of had a mental breakdown and had to be released. And then the guards got real paranoid that he was going to kind of stage, after he'd been released, that he was going to come back with a bunch of people and like storm the prison. But one of the things that they did was parade them around naked. And one of Zimbardo's colleagues saw this happening and called him out on it, saying, "Why are you allowing this to happen?" And Zimbardo had given himself the role of prison warden. So he was kind of in charge of it. But he admitted later on that even he had kind of lost sight of what he was supposed to do, that he had fallen into the role of prison warden and kind of had lost sight of also his role as the person helping to run the experiment and to keep everybody safe in it. So they did have to cut it off pretty quick. But considered one of the famous unethical experiments in psychology because of the trauma that the prisoners faced. So they acted in ways they never would have outside that role, showing the impact of the situation on how we behave. All right, the next part here is social influence theory. And there's 2 main ways or pathways that we tend to influence others, whether it's to buy a product or whether it's to convince your parents to let you do something, or just making a decision about like maybe where you want to attend college. The first is the informational social influence. And this is where you're basing your decision off of reality. So you may not know what to do, but you're conforming and following others because you believe that they have information that is correct, that is accurate. So let's say that the building's on fire, you're going to follow other people because you assume they know where to go. You're not trying to just follow them to be popular. You're following them because there's potential danger and you need to know where to go. If you were trying to make a decision about what college you'd want to go to, here you're considering real logical factors like how far away it is, how much it's going to cost, what are graduation rates like, do they have classes that support the major that you want to study, but you're looking at actual information. The other type of social influence is normative, and here you're following along with others in order to gain approval or to avoid disapproval. So you're driven by that desire to fit in and be liked by others. So for example, when people follow in fashion styles, it's because they want to blend in and they want to avoid being criticized or ridiculed. Normative social influence again, is all about trying to blend in and doing what you think others are doing because you want to be accepted, not necessarily that it's right or wrong, but you want to be accepted. Persuasion is all about how you get people to change their beliefs or their actions or their ideas. Two routes also in changing behavior, and this is part of the elaboration likelihood model. The first is the central route to persuasion, and this is very direct. This is similar to informational. With informational social influence, you're trying to influence people because you think that they have the right information. So again, trying to make a decision, this is like the picking the college based on facts and data and evidence. The peripheral route to persuasion is often designed to distract people, that you're making a decision because that it looks nice, that you're attracting them based on emotions. A lot of times they have celebrity representatives. So if you're picking a college based on how good their football team is or how pretty their campus is, those could be the peripheral route to persuasion. Another example here, when you're picking a cell phone, when you're considering all the details about the phone, what kind of camera it has, what kind of warranty, how many pixels the pictures take, what the battery life is like. That's part of the central route to persuasion. The peripheral route would be that maybe you're swayed by a commercial, that in the commercial, there's an attractive celebrity promoting it. Or when you're at the store, even an attractive salesperson trying to sell you the product. That would be the peripheral route to persuasion. Included in the peripheral route is a tendency called the halo effect. And the halo effect says that we tend to make a quick assumption about something based on a quick positive trait that we notice. So maybe you noticed that the salesperson was kind, so you immediately make your decision off of that. The halo effect often ties in with interviews when you're trying to get to know somebody. If you were doing the hiring for a company, and maybe the person comes in and you like their shoes. So then you tend to think all these other positive things about them, that they're going to be intelligent or competent. Or maybe you see on their resume that they attended the same university as you did. So then they assume that they're going to be good just based on that quick judgment. The horn effect is the opposite of that. Like maybe they come in and you notice they're not wearing socks with dress shoes and you're like, oh, that's weird. So you decide, well, like cognitively, and sometimes you don't even realize it, that they maybe are not as smart or not as competent, even though it was just like a fashion decision. So halo effect and horn effect. Halo effect, again, creates that positive impression, higher equity, more trust, and better value. The horn effect, you have that quick negative impression, which leads to lower equity, less value, and low trust. This one we actually talked about earlier in the year when we did our cognition unit, but when it comes to persuasion, part of it is how you present the information. The foot in the door technique is where you get a person to agree to a small initial request followed by a larger request. If you recall from elementary days, if you give a mouse a cookie, it'll start with a cookie, then it'll ask for milk, then it'll just keep asking for more and more and more. Another example would be a charity organization that might ask you to just sign a petition saying, yeah, I agree with your cause, but then they're going to ask you also, well, will you also make a donation? The door in the face technique is the opposite of that. That's where you start with a large, unreasonable request, which you know they're probably going to say no to, but then you follow it by a smaller request where they're more likely to give into that. The cartoon here is asking, can we shoot off these illegal fireworks? No way. But instead, can I stay out past my curfew? So if you'd started with, can I stay out past my curfew? You probably would have said no. But starting with something big and unreasonable, the other one doesn't sound so bad. The next famous experiment in this section was the Asch conformity study. And in it, I'll go to the next slide. ASH had participants who were asked to match the line lengths. So there's this target line, and then they ask all the participants which line, A, B, or C, is the same length as the target line. And so it's clearly, in this one, B, but all these other people are in on the experiment and they say the wrong answer. And then the true participant has to decide whether or not they're going to conform and also say the wrong answer, or go with what they know is the correct answer. So it was designed to see, will people conform and give into group pressure, even when they know they're right, but will they conform and like question their own beliefs of whether they're right or not? So some things that factor into conformity are the size of the group. Are you anonymous in your decisions? Is the group unanimous? Like, were there other people who said the correct answer? And are you trying to get social acceptance and avoid social rejection? The majority of the people would say the wrong answer in order to conform to the group. You'll watch that in class. And then our final section here is on obedience. And this is also a famous unethical experiment in psychology led by Stanley Milgram. But he wanted to know what leads people to follow the directions of an authority figure. And this was actually done post-World War II. And his question was kind of following, why were so many soldiers willing to follow along with the Nazi agenda, especially when it came to harming prisoners in concentration camps and killing the Jews? Like, why would so many soldiers kill because they were told to? And so many of them said they were just following orders, that they were doing what the authority figure told them to do. So obedience is different from conformity. It is more peer-driven, and it has more to do with the hierarchical social structure, that you obey because you find that somebody higher than you is telling you what to do. But not everybody does, and that's what Milgram was looking at, was why do some people comply or obey and some don't. You'll watch this experiment in class as well, but in the famous experiment, he sets it up where there are two participants, and they're told they're drawing name or numbers, and they say, well, one of you is going to be assigned the position of the teacher and one is the learner. So they go through the stage where the teacher teaches the learner to memorize some a list of vocabulary words, something like that. And then he tells them, we're studying the effects of punishment on learning. So he's going to have them recall these lists that he was supposed to remember, but every time he gets it wrong, he's going to give him a shock. So they set this guy up, that's what's happening in the picture there, to these electric shocks. And they go through, and every time he asks him, was this word on the list? And if he gets it wrong, he gives him a shock. And that's the machine there demonstrating where the shocks come from. And every time he gets it wrong, they have to increase the shock. And the teacher gets it, he starts to get nervous about that. He's giving these increased shocks more and more. Now, a couple details. The teacher participant, the one who's giving the shocks, is a true participant in the experiment. But it turns out the person who is receiving the shocks is in on the experiment. They're a Confederate, meaning that they're going along with the experiment. They're part of it. So he continues to be, the teacher keeps continuing with the testing, and then he's told to keep shocking, and he gets all the way up to where these are dangerous shocks, and he's like, I don't know if I should keep going. He can hear the other guy screaming, saying, I don't like this. At one point, he said he had a heart condition, but the lab instructor is there saying, you have to keep doing this, you have to keep doing this. And in most cases, the teacher goes on to keep shocking all the way to full strength, to the point where he wonders if he killed the other guy. One person in the experiment talks about how after the experiment, he actually didn't know what happened, and he kept checking the obituaries to see if he'd killed somebody. But here's the big trick. The shocks were not real. The participant was an actor, and he pretended that he was getting shocked, but he never was. One of the problems with the experiment, because they knew they were repeating it over and over again, is Milgram did not debrief and tell the participants that the shocks were not real. So many of them left believing that they had shocked somebody. Some of them had left believing that they had actually maybe killed somebody. So definitely considered unethical. So those factors that contributed to why they kept pressing that shock button was the presence and the proximity of the experimenter. Somebody was there who kept saying, you have to continue, you have to continue. They believed that lab partner there was an expert and they were from Yale. And he kept saying the shocks are painful, but they're not dangerous. And they would use phrases like, please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It's absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. And the majority of them did what was told, which is scary, that even when they were harming others and kind of didn't want to, they kept doing it. All right, we'll talk about that one some more in class, and you'll view it in class as well. All right, that's it for section 4B, part 4. I think that was part 3. Part 3.